Our scripture this morning from 1 Corinthians 7. Now regarding the questions you asked in your letter, yes, it is good to abstain from sexual relations, but because there is so much sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife, and each woman should have her own husband. The husband should fulfill his wife's sexual needs, and the wife should fulfill her husband's needs. The wife gives authority over her body to her husband, and the husband gives authority over his body to his wife. Do not deprive each other of sexual relations, unless you both agree to refrain from sexual intimacy for a limited time, so you can give yourselves more completely to prayer. Afterward, you should come together again, so that Satan won't be able to tempt you because of your lack of self-control. I say this as a concession, not as a command. But I wish everyone were single, just as I am. Yet each person has a special gift from God of one kind or another. So I say to those who aren't married and to widows, it's better to stay unmarried, just as I am. But if they can't control themselves, they should go ahead and marry. It's better to marry than to burn with lust. This is the word of the Lord.
It's kind of ironic that many years ago, when Aaron and I got married, that there are lots of great gifts that people gave us as wedding gifts that I have no recollection of, but I do remember this one. And it was a pewter platter that had bunny rabbits all over it. And I opened it and I thought, am I 80 years old getting married? This makes no sense. And it was one of those, you're like, this is a nice gift. Somebody spent money on us, and I have no idea what to do with this. And it was just like, are we going to re-gift it? Is it going to just get packed away? Or is it going to go to Goodwill? And we were at the department store where we'd had our registry, and we were returning some things that were duplicates and wandering around. And I remember yelling to Erin halfway across the department, "Oh, Erin!" And she was like, "What?" And I go, "It's the bunny platter. It's here. They got it here. We can return it. This is great news." And it was like one of those gifts. It was like, I don't know why somebody gave it to us. Great, thank you, but it doesn't fit. And there is something about gifts and gift giving that can either be really beautiful or feel really just like, wow, that has missed the mark. And you think about the times that perhaps you have received a gift and it just felt like somebody knew you. Like maybe you didn't even realize that was something that you wanted or something that you needed, and you got it and you realized, wow, like I feel known, I feel loved. Or maybe you have experienced from either angle the other side of it, where it's like, oh, this just doesn't work, or you think, I have no idea what I should give to this person. And there's something about gifts, both receiving and giving, that can either foster connection and make us feel like, oh, this is really good, or it actually can paradoxically alienate us and push us away. And so when we come to this passage, one of the very practical places in Scripture where Paul rolls his sleeves up and says, let's talk very practically, and even the translation that we read this morning, the New Living Translation, like there is no sense of euphemism going on when you read it of like, oh, this is for real about marriage and about sex and about singleness. There's a lot here. I'm going to focus just in on one part of this passage. There's lots of good, beautiful, and complicated stuff here, but I want to focus in on verse 7. Paul says, I wish everyone were single, just as I am. Yet each person has a special gift from God of one kind or another. And one writer says, the question, do you have the gift of singleness? Nothing strikes more unease or confusion into somebody who is single than being asked that question. Or as another writer puts it, she says, I don't recall putting it on my wish list or asking anyone to give it to me. I don't remember opening it and saying, "Oh, thank you, singleness. How did you know it's perfect?" And this language can feel complicated. It can feel alienating. It can feel confusing for many. It can feel like, oh, I'm single. Do I have this gift of singleness? And maybe it feels like there's a pressure or a duty. Or maybe it feels like there's a disappointment and a frustration and even a bitterness. And so as we are in our sermon series thinking about both singleness and marriage and really how do we live together as a church, this morning I want us to think about this passage, this question around this gift of singleness as Paul describes it. We're going to look at it at three angles. We're going to think about wrong ways that we might receive it or think of it as a gift. We're going to talk about what actually is the gift, and then how do we receive it? How do we steward it well? So as we think about wrong ways, there's a lot of ways in which we might say, oh, okay, it's a gift, but only if ... Like there are ways in which we might say it's a gift, but we have some kind of conditions or even demands for us to say, oh, this is a gift. So first we could say, sometimes people will say, well, it's a gift, but only if I can give it back after a little while. And there's this notion that singleness is a gift, but it's only supposed to be temporary. So you think about some of the titles that people write Christian books about this. So some of the titles could be, these are all real titles. One is called Single for a Season, Married for a Reason. Another one, What's a Girl to Do While Waiting for Mr. Right? Another one, Not Yet Married, The Pursuit of Joy in Singleness and Dating. And the idea becomes singleness is a training ground, as one person puts it, a training ground where you really have to take it seriously on God's terms, she says, so that you don't come to marriage ill-prepared for its demands. And so the notion here is that singleness exists as a preparation for something other than singleness. And that if singleness is really received as a gift, well, it's oriented toward its own extinction. That singleness is only supposed to be for a little while, as if you're like, okay, I'll receive this gift, but I'm really hoping I can return it very shortly for actually a better gift that I really want. So that's one way that people approach it. Another way, people would pray, oh, it's a gift, but only if it really fits me. Only if it really fits me. And so some people take Paul's language here of singleness as a gift and they think, oh, well, this indicates that you have to have some kind of special ability. That you're single, you know that you have the gift if you have this unusual ability to be all right with not being married, not having kids, not having sex. As Sam Allberry puts it, it's like we've conceived of it as a superpower. And it's a gift that you can receive because you're particularly fitted for it. Or third and connected, some people might say, well, it's a gift if I want it. It's a gift if it's something that I actually want to happen. So one writer talks about and says, there are lots of people who are single, but only some people who are single have the gift, and you have to voluntarily, you have to freely choose it. And if you are single, but you aren't wanting it, then actually you don't have a gift, you have an affliction, is their word. This is singleness as trial, singleness as affliction, rather than as gift. And the problem that I think is inherent in all of these approaches is that there is nothing that is innately or intrinsically good about singleness as itself. That each of these views is in some way saying singleness, but only certain kinds of singleness or only in certain ways that you would do it, does it have value? Which I think actually doesn't line up with what we saw 2 weeks ago in Luke 20 when Jesus paints a picture that singleness and marriage both are pictures, they are windows into God's love and the kingdom that is coming. But these views all say, no, there's nothing that's good here in itself. And it means that, well, if singleness requires a superpower, then that tells us that singleness in itself must be really terrible. Like it must be something awful if it takes a superpower to actually be able to do it and to do it well. Or it creates two levels or two tiers of people, and you have singles who can do it and want it, and then you have everybody else. And if you find yourself single and you're not thinking, I'm choosing this, or I'm really good at this, then it's like, well, tough luck. You're kind of out in the cold. And all these things get even worse. So I think there's lots of ways that we can take this language of singleness as gift and that we miss the mark, because there is something missing in how we are thinking about it. Which brings us then to our second point. What is this gift rightly understood? Look back at the language there in verse 7. I want to call our attention to it. But I wish everyone were single, just as I am. Yet each person has a special gift from God of one kind or another. And that language of one kind or another is language that is indicating two things of different kinds. And I think we go wrong when we approach this passage and we only see singleness as a gift, whereas I think what Paul is implying here is singleness and marriage, both of them as gifts. It is not that just singleness, but it is both. Now, I don't think this means a spiritual gift in the way that Paul sometimes uses this language. I think he means it in a more general way about how does God at work and how do we understand and see what God is up to. It's really similar to what we saw last week in just a couple paragraphs later in 1 Corinthians 7. It's like what Pastor Nick said about calling. Are you single? Then you have the gift of singleness. Are you married? Then you have the gift of marriage. That it is a way of understanding our situation or the state that we are in, rather than being something special that God might give to you when you find yourself in that place, as if, well, you're single, but you might get the gift of singleness, or you're married and maybe you'll get the gift of marriage. But no, actually, to be single is to have the gift of singleness. To be married is to have the gift of marriage. And in both cases, we can experience the goodness of God in that situation. So to talk about it as gift is a way of framing our perspective, how we approach and how we look at our situation. It's inviting us to be able to say, can I see that God is up to something here? Can I see that I'm not just here by accident? I'm not just here because something has happened or hasn't happened for me, but actually I'm in this place because God is up to something and that God is doing this. And the gift is to be able to say, God, I can be content and I can trust you in this. And that is one of the questions I think that's at play here is, do we approach this and receive whatever state that we are in? Do we receive it grudgingly or trustingly? And I don't think the latter is a word, but it gets at the contrast of how we approach it. And when I was a kid, we as a family, my parents were big on all of us sharing in chores and responsibility for the household. So when I was, I think, an early teenager, it was like, okay, we're going to divide up on a Saturday who's vacuuming, which bathroom is getting cleaned, all of this. And this was not exactly my favorite part of the week. This was not something that I enjoyed doing. I think often I was a rather grumpy kid when it came to cleaning. And I remember my parents wanting me not just to clean, but to have a good attitude about it. And I remember thinking, okay, that is way, way too far. I will clean this bathroom, but you cannot make me like it. And to be told that I'm actually in the wrong because I'm grumpy about it felt like it was just adding insult to injury. I get it now with a few more birthdays. I can look back and go, yeah, there is something that's different about it. Like if I could have seen, hey, this is actually really good because it means we're a family and we're all doing this together and that everybody has a part to play. And there are things that I can learn by doing this, not just practically, but in my character and all. Like I want to imagine that I could go back and be like, okay, I can do this not just grudgingly, but trustingly. That somehow what you are giving me to do, I don't have a choice in it, but what I'm constrained in doing, actually I can see it and receive it as a gift. I think that is what God is inviting us into with this language of gift, of singleness, and gift of marriage. Now the challenge is, how do we see the giver of the gift? Because to be told that God is up to this, for some people, does not engender a sense of gladness or trust. It actually makes you more unsettled. Why would God give me this desire for marriage and then not give me a spouse? Or why would God give me this particular spouse with all of their problems? Why would God put me in a marriage that is really hard and unhappy? And to say that marriage and singleness are gift could be ways of actually driving us further from God, rather than helping us go, okay, God, what are you up to? How do I trust you? Here's where I think the question goes. Kathy Keller, at a conference that Redeemer Manhattan did on this, talked about her own experience of Crohn's. She was diagnosed with Crohn's disease in the mid-90s, and really a severe case of it. And she shared how it was a struggle, and for a long time she prayed, but she prayed to God, God, fix this. Take this away. And she realized that the thing that she wasn't praying was anything along the lines of when Jesus says, pray, not my will, but yours be done. And she came to realize, as she said, that her illness was not the biggest problem, or that singleness is not your biggest problem. Marriage is not your biggest problem. Your circumstances are not your biggest problem. The biggest problem is a lack of confidence and trust in the God of the universe. That underneath these questions about can I receive my situation as a calling or as a gift is, will I trust God? And so this question, as practical as it is, comes ultimately down to the question of, will I believe that God is looking out for me? Will I believe that God sees me? Will I believe that God has my life in his hands? It is a question that brings us afresh back to the cross and to the resurrection. Because in the cross of Jesus, God is guaranteeing for us his heart toward us. Which is why Paul can say in another place in his letters, if he did not spare his own son, if he freely gave his son for our lives and for our sake, how in the world will we not trust that he'll do anything and everything else that we genuinely need and is good? If you are in doubt, which we all struggle with, which we all come in and out of, if you are in doubt about how does God see me? Does God know me? Does God get me? Is God for me? Look at the cross of Jesus. Here is God's heart for you to meet you in your need and to show his love to you. If you are in doubt about, is God able to do something? Is God powerful and at work? Look at the resurrection. Here is God overturning the old order and the brokenness of the world to begin his new creation. The question, will we trust that God is giving us in our lives? Is he good to us? Is this a gift where I find myself? Can I trust him? Can I be content? The answer is to come back to his grace, to come back to the goodness of what God is up to at the very center of reality, the cross and the resurrection of Jesus. And seen through and from his grace to us, it can change and invite us into saying, where I am, God is up to something. I can receive my singleness, I can receive my marriage, whatever it feels like right now in the moment, this is God's gift and God is at work. So what does that look like? Let's think third then about how do we receive, how do we use this gift? My first point is to say, can we celebrate with each other? So I am told, I'm at an age now where I don't get invited to showers very often, okay? We're now at the age where Aaron hosts showers rather than we get invited to showers particularly. And I'm told that it has now become slightly passé for the person to sit there and open the gifts and for everybody to sit around, which I feel is sad. That's like one of my favorite parts of going to a party or to a shower. I like seeing the gifts that people get. I like them going, oh, this is perfect. Oh, I can totally see how I'll use this. Thank you so much. Like, I think that's exciting. And I think that gives us a picture of how do we need to celebrate with each other the gifts that we have received from God. Do we celebrate alongside one another? Hey, you have this gift. Isn't God good? As one woman, Sujin Park, there was a Gospel Coalition podcast a couple months ago about singleness. They had a round table, and she said this. She said, it's one thing to say that singleness is a gift. She said, it's another thing to actually celebrate the life of a single. And she went on to say that she feels celebrated, she feels seen and cared about when people engage her, not about primarily or in the first instance, is she single? Oh gosh, you're not married yet? Is there anybody on the horizon? But instead, they celebrate her for who she is and what God is up to in her life. What is going on in her ministry? What is going on in her extended family or in her home? Do we engage each other through primarily the lens of our singleness or our marriage, or do we engage each other as whole people celebrating what God is up to, yes, including in our singleness and our marriage? So that's our first thing. How do we receive the gift? We celebrate each other's places. Second, we think about how do we lean into the gift of where God has put us. So one of my favorite old TV shows is The West Wing. And in it, the character who plays the president is supposedly like uber bright, had been an economics professor, won a Nobel Prize, and then becomes the president. And it's one of these things where no matter what he does, he's really smart, and no matter what he does, people are seeing him and reacting to him that way. And there is this sense of, he can come across to some people as arrogant. And so there is one of the episodes where they're talking about this, and it's a presidential debate, and the debate happens, and President Bartlett absolutely destroys his opponent, just demolishes him with his arguments and his insight and all. And a couple of the characters are debriefing afterwards. And the one character is saying, I thought you guys were going to have to fall over yourselves apologizing and trying to make a way for people not to be, upset or alienated by the president. And the other character, one of the staff members, says, no, he goes, actually, we had done polls and we realized that no matter what he said or did, he was going to be seen as arrogant. And it came to us And one of the other staffers said to me, don't you realize this is a gift? If whatever he does, he's going to be seen as arrogant, then we might as well use it. We might as well knock some bodies down in the process. And I love that idea of let's knock some bodies down. And I used to tell my students when I was a professor in the UK, and no matter what I did, I couldn't escape that I was American. They would see me as American with all of our cultural stereotypes. And so I just resolved, I'm going to knock some bodies down, and I'm going to say some things at times that are candid and that you're going to find uncomfortable as an American observing what are the ways in which your English cultural upbringing is distorting ministry and the gospel. And I'm just going to say it because one way or the other, I'm American. I might as well knock some bodies down in the process. And so my encouragement to you is you are single or you are married, you might as well knock some bodies down in the process. You might as well lean into the gift where God has you and say, how can I experience God's goodness? How can I actually utilize the opportunities that come in this calling, in this gift? And we'll talk more next week, particularly around like the advantages of singleness from another passage in 1 Corinthians 7. But here I just want to say, like, how can we imagine that? How can we approach and say, God, this is where you have me. How can I lean into it? How can I utilize this well? As one of my friends, a theologian who has written a lot on this, who is single, probably now in his upper 50s or so, he says, singleness, can we approach it as a season of life that God gives to us that frees us for whatever assignment he has for however long he calls us? Like he says, how can you approach it? How can you lean into it as a gift? See it as, okay, this is a season God has given me, and it frees me up for whatever it is that God may be calling me into. I don't know how long it'll be, but can I lean into it? Or similarly with marriage, can we lean in and say, God, this is a calling, this is a way in which you have given me an opportunity to share my life with somebody and the good that comes from that, to offer hospitality to others, to raise kids in a discipleship-oriented way. All of those are opportunities that come not just from being married, almost all of those are available to any of us, but maybe especially open to us as we lean into that gift. Third, and this goes with the idea of leaning into the gift, a third way for us to be real about how we use or receive this is, can we give each other space for it to be not uncomplicated? Can we bear with each other in the midst the fact that it is mixed up, the fact that it is challenging, the fact that it can be difficult, and can we give each other space for it to be not uncomplicated? Like I read this passage and you can see Paul clearly has a preference for singleness. And as somebody who is married and thank God happily married, I read it and I find this passage uncomfortable. Like I sit there and I ask myself, okay, is Paul implying to me that I would be more effective, more fruitful, and I should be single rather than married? And there's a tension there. How do I sit in that tension? How do I let it be complicated for me? How do we let it be complicated where we have space to say, yes, this is a gift, and man, I find it hard. I don't feel like right now like I want it. And I think that can be true whether you are single or you are married. That all of us go through periods and stretches where we think, this may be where God has me, but I feel conflicted and I feel frustrated and I'm not sure I wish this were the case. And so how do we hold each other together gently and tenderly in the midst of this? Yes, celebrating, yes, leaning into and giving each other space for how this can be complicated. And I think this is one of those places where I think there is a little bit of asymmetry, that I think it is appropriate for if you were single, and in a way this isn't true for marriage, but if you were single, I think it's appropriate to be able to say that you can be both content in your singleness and want to get married, and those can go together. They're not inconsistent. One of the single guys here in a conversation with me said, and I love the way he put it, he goes, I have the internal desire to be married. There are some external pressures that I feel to get married, and I am content right now where God has me in my singleness. I think that's a great place. If you can be there, that is a great way to put it. It is not wrong to hold those together. Even last week when we were talking about 1 Corinthians 7 and this question around how are you content in your calling? And Paul says to slaves, like, look, being a slave does not hamper your faith. You could be, in the ancient church, you could have been an elder in the church and been a slave, which is a weird juxtaposition in our minds, but was a possibility. And at the same time, Paul says, if you can get your freedom, great, go for it. Like, it is not hampering you, it's not helping you one way or the other, what situation or stage or gift that you have. And there are some places where if you can change it, that's fine, good, go for it. And I think how we hold together the complicatedness of this means that we give each other freedom in all of the messiness. And then the fourth way for us to think about how to receive this, I think we need to be open to have other people speak into and challenge us. How are we holding these gifts? Knowing that it can be hard, knowing that it is complicated, nonetheless, can we cultivate in our own lives an openness that somebody who knows us, somebody who has our ear that we know is for us and gets us and loves us, do they have the opportunity, the freedom to speak into and challenge us about how we're holding these gifts, about how we are living in our marriage or in our singleness? That, I think, is one of the challenges that I have experienced, that I feel like we as pastors feel like as we're talking about singleness, is there is no one size fits all. If I have talked to one single person at Redeemer, then I have talked to one single person at Redeemer, and I don't necessarily have like broad, overarching, applies to everybody insight. And I think that's true in our marriages as well. Like, we can all be in these callings, and we can be doing it well, or we can be doing it in distorted, self-centered ways. And how do we give each other space for that? And receive where people might want to speak into it. So Sam Allberry, who is a single Christian theologian and pastor, says this. He says, there is a need to challenge those who defer marriage for ungodly reasons, without demeaning those whose singleness is either not their choice or has in fact been chosen for the sake of the kingdom. There is also a need to affirm the goodness and advantages of singleness without unwittingly playing into selfish motivations of those for whom singleness seems easier. That's the reality, is that we can be in all these places, and there can be great reasons, there can be not so good reasons, and we have to give each other space and challenge and grace all alongside. And hopefully that is the kind of community that we cultivate as we live into this, as we think about from Mark 10, what does it mean that we are family, and that our first family is the church before it is whatever biological or household family that we live in, that if we are cultivating those kinds of relationships, that we are leaning into an ability to speak and to hear the truth in love. What I hope that we are seeing over these last 3 weeks in particular is that consistently the Bible talks about singleness as it relates to marriage, and marriage as it relates to singleness. And that both of them alongside each other are gifts. And that both of them alongside each other are callings. And both of them alongside each other are pictures of God's love for us in the gospel. And that you cannot pull one away from the other. And so while I think marriage is the normal situation, that the vast majority of people over time and history of humanity will be married, that does not, in the gospel, make it normative. It is normal in that it is typical, but that does not mean, well, that's the standard or that's the first thing that singleness is defined against and comes up less than. That both of these are alongside each other in God's kingdom. Let me close with this story. So, when I was, feels fitting here for this time of year, when I was thinking about heading to college, I had 5 schools that I applied to, kind of arranged. I had like a stretch school. I had this is a good school. That's my first choice. And then down at the bottom of the list, 5 of 5, and it wasn't close, it was a ways down the list, was the state school where I lived, the University of Missouri. And about April or so, as offers and financial aid is coming back, I am realizing that the most sensible, the best choice is actually Mizzou. Now, it wasn't, I don't have any options. There are other places I could have gone. So there was some choice, but there was also a sense of some constraint of like, well, this makes a lot better sense. This financially sets up a lot better. And so I found myself at the last minute reconciling myself to going to the school that I had really not wanted to go to, that I had not even initially wanted to apply to, but my father had said, you probably need like a safeguard, a fallback. You should apply to Mizzou. And I was like, grudgingly okay. And yet, it was a blessing. Even within probably a month, 2 months, I was already able to begin to see there, this is actually a really good place for me to be. This is not the place that I was in a position to say yes to, but actually this is a place where already I can see God is doing some things in my life. And would he have done it somewhere else? I don't know. Maybe. What would it have looked like? I don't know. But all I can say is here, I can see that this is God's gift to me. This is God's calling to me. I didn't necessarily want to be here, but I can see that I am being challenged to grow in my faith. I can see that I am being given friendships and relationships with people who can care for me and spur me on and model for me the Christian faith. I can see that here's a place where I can really dive into what I want to learn and grow. Can we have eyes to see that God is up to something, and it may not be dependent on what we would choose if it were up to us, but God is no less good and no less sovereign and no less able to form and shape and lean us into trusting Jesus in that place. Let's pray together. Jesus, you, so often, you are the model for us of one who said yes to your Father's will, but in a way that was not uncomplicated, in a way that you at the same time said, is there another way, Lord, that this cup might not be the one that I have to drink? And yet not my will, but yours be done. And because, Jesus, you said that, our lives are rescued. The kingdom of heaven is opened up to us. And in the places that we find ourselves that may be complicated, Lord Jesus, that you show us, and in more, you give us your grace to live into it. And to trust you and to say, I know that you have me. I know that you're for me. I know that you see me. I know that you love me. That your grace is powerful and at work wherever it is you call us, whatever gift it is that you put us in. There, Jesus, you are. And so we pray, renew us, meet us, help us to lean in, help us to trust you and to say, yes, I want to steward this gift well. In the midst of the joys, in the midst of the opportunities, in the midst of the challenges. Jesus, be a gracious, kind master and friend to us, we ask. Amen.